Let's talk about Legacy, and in particular, I want to talk about Legacy as it relates to video games. So anyways, here's a trailer for Dragon Age the Veilguard. And frankly, it's a pile of shit. People say don't judge a book by its cover, but I'm sorry, that's what the cover is for. I don't need to play the game to know it's going to be bad, because you can tell that they haven't even got the basics right. Let me burst your hopeful optimism on this one. You think that this is just the marketing department going rogue, but the trailer was in-engine, the Frostbite engine to be exact. That means that the devs worked on this trailer. Someone wrote that script. Someone approved that script. And then they got the voice actors to record all their parts. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This involved a lot of BioWare stuff and was approved on multiple levels. In short, they actually thought this trailer would make fans happy. Just look at the thumbnail to see where their heads are at. You literally have three options: incompetence, malice, or both. This wasn't an oopsie that slipped through the cracks. Like, they literally thought we wanted a heist movie roll call that summarizes every character's personality instead of letting the viewer be intrigued and want to learn more. So then we go on to the gameplay trailer where they were in full damage control from the backlash that they somehow didn't see coming, and then proceeded to show the minimum scope of gameplay with very little explanation as to what could be possible, and now they are still in damage control because the gameplay looked cookie cutter and basic, and now they have to quickly post all of this information about what will be possible later in the game, but say less. If the gameplay built up to be something really amazing, then that is what they would have shown. What they are trying to do is to get the viewer to speculate the gameplay into something better than it actually is. And what it actually is a regression that is dated and outshone by most rivals in the action and CRPG genre. And that's why they showed that particular trailer, because it involved Harding, Varric, and Solus, because that's all they've got. So let's start from the beginning. I'm going to talk about a few games, and first I want to outline how effective Legacy is in gaming and how powerful it is for long-term success, but also how the gaming industry at large demonstrates that it doesn't understand Legacy at all. First, we need to bust a myth. Really good games don't just come out of nowhere. Practice makes perfect, and the reality is that most breakout successes are not the first attempt. Now, we can take that a step further. Throwing together a team of talented devs also doesn't make good games. Those people need vision, leadership, and someone that understands what they are trying to create across multiple titles, and they need to be consistent where it matters. Why is this? Well, here's another myth. Games need to find an audience. It's pedantically correct, but a more accurate way of putting it is that games need to make their audience. Game fans make more game fans, and a perfect example of this is Demon's Souls. No one knew that they wanted cryptic storytelling through item descriptions. No one knew that they wanted to risk losing their experience when they died. And no one knew that they wanted feats so much. In fact, people forget that when Demon's Souls was first presented, it was actually met with a lot of negative feedback. Sony didn't think it was going to do well, and the game had middling sales in Japan. But it did okay in the West. People started to get the vision. They started to enjoy the challenge. People started sifting through the lore and telling their friends. The early Demon's Souls fans were the spark that turned the game into a sleeper hit, which would then become the springboard for Dark Souls. Dark Souls launched From Software into prominence. Dark Souls 2 built on that success. I mean, in my heart, Dark Souls is the best one. It's like how a band's second album is always the best one, but I digress. Dark Souls 2 was popular in spite of all the complainers. We got power stances. And then we had Dark Souls 3, more improvements. Every time From Software released a Souls game, they iterated. They made the games bigger. They added something new. But guys, it's the same damn game. And of course it is, because they were building a legacy. Every time a Souls game came out, they got more fans and they sold more copies. So we have Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and then arguably the next step is Elden Ring. Game of the year 2022 Elden Ring. Like, we're at the point where if a From Software game is launching, you don't launch that month. Why? Because From Software built a legacy that is large enough that no one will notice your game because everyone wants to see what From Software is cooking. I want to stress this. Hidetaka Miyazaki is instrumental to these successes, but this legacy goes all the way back to Kingsfield and Armored Core. The ideas for invasions comes from Armored Core. The Moonlight Sword is in Kingsfield. These are things that predate Hidetaka Miyazaki. So yeah, the guy's obviously an excellent steward and he's done a lot, but I think he understands legacy. He didn't say, oh, Moonlight Sword, that's from 1994. New audiences won't be able to relate to that. It took them 4 games before they made an open world game. Let that sink in. They didn't rush in to make an open world game, even though it would have instantly brought in more players at face value. Why? Legacy. They knew their core audience didn't play the game for traversal. In fact, they only did open world after Zelda came out and set a new precedent for open world exploration that would fit in with what they already had. Now, this is just one example. I mean, we can look at Nintendo and Mario, we can look at Nintendo and pretty much any first party they have. But the next one I want to look at is Blizzard. And Blizzard is a great example because it's like watching the rise of Rome and a gradual descent into chaos as Microsoft plays a fiddle to the screams of burning children. World of Warcraft. Breakout success, right? Wrong. Blizzard wanted to make a Warhammer game, and Warhammer rejected them, so they made what would come to be a very popular RTS game named Warcraft, which released in 1994. Then they made Warcraft 2, which was better, and then there was Warcraft 3, and Warcraft 3 was special because it was getting to the point where Blizzard started introducing RPG elements into their RTS. And finally, you have the release of World of Warcraft, which then took all of that lore, all of that nostalgia, all of that carried plot into the MMO genre. But more importantly, they were taking 10 years worth of legacy into this game. Blizzard grew and trained loyalty into their fan base to such a degree that people still believe that Blizzard only makes high quality games. And yeah, they might start complaining from time to time, but we all know that Blizzard boomers are one cinematic away from having their faith completely restored. Now, by contrast, you have the hubris of Diablo Immortal in 2018.
Is this an out of season April Fool's joke?
Where Blizzard devs told everyone to get excited for a Diablo announcement. Diablo, of course, being another of Blizzard's leading games on PC. And once everyone was in the room, they announced Diablo Immortal, a mobile phone game. That's right, the company known for making high-quality PC games dragged everyone over, people took planes, people planned their annual leave, they got excited for a PC game about killing demons that they would buy once and then own, because that is the legacy that Blizzard built since 1991. This is a great example of a company not understanding its own legacy and being completely unaware of how they built it in the first place, because if they understood how they built it, they would also understand how to modify it. Now, luckily for Blizzard, they've done such a good job at growing their audience and fostering their legacy between 1991 and say 2016 that it's really difficult for them to mess up. But it is borrowed time. It's just a lot of borrowed time in comparison to a company like EA. I mean, people are very quick to forget about scams like Warcraft Reforged, but people tend to have a long memory for Battlefront 2 loot boxes, for example. Now wait up, because I can hear you typing about Fortnite, PUBG, Dota. Okay, sure. You get these breakout successes from time to time, very little behind them, but it's a little like winning the lottery. I mean, Fortnite was literally a battle royale pivot to save a game that was basically dead on arrival, and it just happened to work. But you know, it could have just died then and there, and Epic Games is a company that has the bank to gamble. Okay, here's another example. Everyone thinks Stellar Blade is a breakout success. No, it's not. For one, the director worked on Blade and Soul, and after that they ran a gacha game called Destiny's Child, which ended up shutting down. And then they made Nikke Goddess of Victory, which is still quite a popular gacha game. And look, I know gacha game to PlayStation exclusive action combat game doesn't seem like a natural transition, but there is a ton of Nikke and Blade and Soul in Stellar Blade. This is a legacy that Shift Up has been working on, and now it's starting to get some real traction. And there's definitely a consistency in each step that outlines the audience that they are building. I'm personally excited to see where Shift Up goes with that, but the important takeaway is that there's been a lot of work in the background, not only in building the legacy in terms of a player base, but also a legacy in vision. It takes time, it takes refinement, and sometimes it takes some trial and error. Notice that the games aren't Nikke Child, Nikke Goddess of Victory, and then Nikke Stellar Blade, because they understand that names have expectations, and that's pretty intelligent. So anyways, let's circle back to BioWare and Dragon Age The Veilguard. I mean, for starters, dumb name should have stuck with Dreadwolf. BioWare does not understand its own legacy. It's hardly surprising since everyone that made the studio great is gone and EA have them in a chokehold, but these are just excuses ultimately, they don't really matter. BioWare's legacy starts all the way back at Baldur's Gate, a Dungeons & Dragons PC game where you form a party and a lot of the game revolves around the choices you make and the consequences of those choices, especially the consequences for your companions. Right from the get-go, BioWare developed themselves into a studio that was known for engaging narratives that focus on choices, consequences, and later romance. BioWare is not known for their combat systems. They've always struggled with selling impact on the whole, but most of their games were really good at presenting the player with companions, forming relationships with those companions, and then raising the stakes with consequences that will either fall on you or your companions and seeing that play out. That's really the heart of BioWare's legacy. So that's BioWare, or at least it was BioWare. The Dragon Age series was always a weird one in that all that experience from games before it culminated in Dragon Age Origins, which is regarded by most as the best in the series, and you can see why. At a glance, Dragon Age 2 tried to take the game in a more action combat direction, and BioWare just wasn't good at that. Also, no Morrigan. And then Inquisition was good, but it was definitely at a stage where EA had a lot of input. For starters, the world was huge, and it didn't really serve a purpose other than to put on the box that the world was huge. It felt like you were walking around an MMO with a player count of 1. They forced BioWare to use the Frostbite engine, which caused a ton of technical issues back and forth, but they also started to really brighten up the game. It almost felt like someone said, "You see these flashy effects from Battlefield? Yeah, do that." So the game started to pull away from its roots. So we can see all the way from the beginning of Dragon Age post Origins, they never really knew what they were doing with the series in terms of consistency. Anyways, let's start off with what set Dragon Age Origins apart, because that's really the core. That's your legacy and your audience. And I know someone's going to have the midwit take of pointing out that Dragon Age Inquisition sold more, but let me burst your bubble. 1. More people played games in 2014 than 2009. 2. It was really the first fantasy RPG you could buy on a PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. 3. Everyone was excited for what the Frostbite engine meant for graphical fidelity, because 4. Morrigan was going to be in Inquisition, and that was a huge deal because of Origins. Speaking of Morrigan, I'll just say the quiet part out loud. Most guys just want to get right in between those religion-hating witch melons and just... Yeah, did I mention romancing characters? Seeing which characters you could have intimate relations with was a big part of the game, and I feel really stupid for even saying this because it's so obvious that means you need characters that you think the player will be attracted to. Like, you need to actually want to see this play out. No one wants to watch Clash of Fortnite characters canoodling, and once they start, are they going to announce their profession while they're doing it? Rook, I'm going to scout every crevice of your body, because scouting is what I do best. I detect that you like me, because I am a detective. Are we jumping in bed again? Because I'm used to more tentacles than most. Shut up! Dragon Age Origins is an old game now, but Morrigan was hot, Leliana was hot, heck, Alistair was hot, but they were also believable. If you played the game through, I'm sure you would have drawn an attachment to at least one of the characters, because they were written to have their own story, their own desires, and their own struggles. Their profession and the how was secondary. Some of them didn't even like what they were. Now, when it came to struggle, Dragon Age Origins is not a hopeful story. It's an edgy story, and I think the game somehow doesn't come across as dark as it actually is. Are you aware that you spend a lot of time just talking to people while you are covered in blood? Are you aware that children are being sacrificed so their blood can be used to summon demons? Are you aware that the Veil is a nightmare realm that threatens the existence of all life and no one wants to go there? Are you aware that there is a seemingly unstoppable horde that is sweeping through the lands and killing everyone? Are you aware that slavery is just a normal part of life in Dragon Age? Do you know that you drink the blood of Blightspawn mixed with Archdemon blood and Lyrium to become a Grey Warden, and many of the recruits die in the process? Now, after hearing all this, I'm going to ask a very simple question. Just hearing what I just said, pretend that you are an artist commissioned to work on this game, and that's your brief. Do you think you're going to make something that looks like this? Maybe if you're delusional. Now, I will caveat here in saying that Dragon Age also has the theme of a band of heroes pulling together to face against the odds. And there were definitely moments of levity and fun, but it was the contrast that made it real. Morrigan always gave Alistair shit because they had opposing beliefs. It made sense that there was friction, but Origins never went out of its way to make light of the serious moments. And I have to ask, you look at the Veil Guard, how are you supposed to take it seriously when these characters are in danger, or if they die? Like, this art style is just objectively antagonistic to being taken in a serious light. You're asking the viewer to work against the art style because the art style is selling softness, it's selling simplicity, it's selling exaggerated expressions, it's selling baby's first Dragon Age. And I'll be real, I don't care who it is. If you tell me that you are with me, if you hit me with a "let's finish this" or a "eyes up, stay frosty," I will let you die. I'd rather play the game without you, because let's be real, the companions are just another skill tree for your personal abilities. And I know what they were thinking. Some idiot looked at games that were trending. They saw the YouTube videos that said that graphics don't matter and that art style is more important. They saw that Fortnite is really popular. They read the study that said that Gen Z responds better to personalized advertising that represented them. They looked at hero intros in Valorant and they thought, these are the people we need. I hope for BioWare's sake that I'm wrong, but I don't think Gen Z cares about a franchise from 10 years ago. Most gamers are in their 30s. RPGs are not accessible for people that are time poor, so I just don't see anything good coming from this. BioWare has spat on their own legacy, and their legacy decided to spit back at them. They can't even blame their fans for being mad because they literally did the opposite of what anyone wanted. Even under the most charitable light, you still find yourself making concessions and excuses for things that you know would be better if they just looked at Origins and iterated on it. But what about the combat? Well, Dragon Age Origins essentially featured classes with skill trees. You could swap to any character in your party, and you can pause the game and queue actions. In addition to this, you could write macros for your party AI, which I thought was a cool feature, but admittedly it didn't work very well. Like I said, BioWare always struggled to sell impact, but overall it was possible. Remember that this is a game about you and your companions, so it felt good to have Morrigan cast a shield on you, Liliana snipes the enemy caster, Alistair taunts the Pride Demon. This matters. Your characters aren't just a spell from off screen or a dialogue option. They are an important part of the mission. You can't do this without them. Their development and what they do affects your character, and so the game is far less about simply the Grey Warden, but instead it's about the accomplishments of your group. That's an important distinction, and it's difficult to fake that when there's a lot of self-focus in the gameplay. So yeah, I mean, the irony is that Dragon Age Origins has more in common with Baldur's Gate 3 than its own damn named series. Had they the balls to stick with it, we'd be talking about having intercourse with griffins instead of bears. I mean, please don't do that, but you get what I'm saying. You could argue that combat improved across 2 and Inquisition, but that would be missing that people generally prefer Origins, and there's 2 reasons. 1, BioWare doesn't make good action games, and 2, the combat wasn't as important as involving the characters. The Origins characters were the best characters, and Origin is the game that involves interacting with those characters in combat the most. Let me quickly shoot down your what about Mass Effect and why this shift towards Mass Effect combat doesn't work for Dragon Age. Mass Effect is a cover shooter with guns, so even with companions and their abilities, you expect their interactions to come from a peripheral. The majority of the skill element leans on aim instead of skill rotation and class roles. A lot of Dragon Age combat is melee. It was far more personal in the sense of who does what, and even with the changes across the series, that part was consistent, especially on higher difficulties. People buy Dragon Age games for their characters. They want to see those characters evolve and change over time across multiple titles. They want to see them and they want to be them at their weakest and their most powerful, and sometimes their most naked. And no amount of RGB gamer lights on screen is going to change that.
Oh, for fuck's sake.